Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
How was last night? It was lovely.
Good. All in all, you're gonna wonder where everyone is because we've all got to sign in just on one.
I'll take a picture of your boardroom
Yeah.
later, because this is, that's I don't know why.
Would you get a picture of us now?
Yes.
What's up? Yeah, we'll do one time.
Yeah, you gotta tell.
So get a picture with you all sitting.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
That'd be great. What is a nice sound?
We'll probably need to do this.
Thank you very much.
Interview.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well. I've got a very special guest coming up for you guys very shortly. First off, Martin obviously isn't here. He is swimming with hammerhead sharks in the Caribbean, and he's delegated to Chris and I to hold this and welcome you and lead you through this morning. So we have, as I said, a world-class guest coming up. He's actually in Canada and it's 3 a.m. there. So kudos to him just to start off with. And Chris will be doing his very own Graham Norton to introduce our guest, Dr. Tom Deans. So what I'd like to ask, please, is if you could perhaps drop your cameras onto close and make sure that you're muted, give our guest the space he deserves. And also, if you've got any questions, if you could add them in the chat box. Chris has already got some questions for him. So I hope you really enjoy this, and I'll see you on the other side. So, Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yes, I would like to introduce Dr. Tom Deans, who is an award-winning speaker and New York Times top 10 author of Every Family's Business. With more than 1 million copies sold, it remains the best-selling North American family business book of all time. He followed that book with 2 more on the subject of transitioning family wealth. He followed that book with 2 he followed that book with 2 more on the subject of transitioning family wealth, and much of his literary success is owed to prolific speaking career and his contrarian approach to building, protecting, and transferring family business wealth. He resides in Toronto, Canada, and has been the CEO of a US firm and earned his PhD from the University of Warwick in the UK, and has delivered more than 2,000 keynote speeches in 28 countries on the subject of generational wealth. Over to Dr. Tom Deans. Tom, if you come off mute.
There we go. Just before I can, just want to start by saying that we're in the middle of large.
Has Tom disappeared?
We obviously have a technical hitch, folks, dialing in at 3 a.m. from Toronto. If you'd like to bear with us, please, and we'll get Tom back shortly. One thing that I was going to suggest at the end, but I'll suggest it now, is I mentioned Martin is off there, and he sent me a picture last night about with him petting hammerhead sharks. When we meet on the 4th, I've talked about this thing called misogi. It's this Japanese ritual. Toby was right. It is about spiritual cleansing, but effectively, I wanted to look at just doing one thing each year that scares you. So if you haven't actually thought of that thing yet, Martin's obviously given us a great example with swimming with the sharks. That's your homework until now and the 4th of March. Let me just try and get Tom back on the line. Talk amongst yourselves for now, please, team.
Can you hear me? There we go. Hello.
Welcome back.
Yeah, listen, we're in the middle of the largest winter storm of the year here in Toronto. So it is. I wish I could show you what's going on outside. So my connection may be a little bit frail, but glad to join you.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your efforts, particularly this time of the morning for you. over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, I really want to begin about all three of my books are on a very awkward subject, a subject that is difficult for anyone advising in the wealth space, the insurance space, and it is a subject about the transition of family wealth. It is an enormously emotional subject. We know that business owners especially are struggling with this issue. In the UK, 85% of all businesses are family owned and controlled. They absolutely dominate the ownership structure. In fact, it's the case all around the world. In Canada, it's 90% ownership. And that definition really captures a broad category of business owners. There are many people who are 100% voting shareholders. They have total control of their business. They have no one related by blood or marriage working in that family business, and they don't self-describe as a family business owner. The reality is they are. In the event of their death or incapacitation, the voting shares will transition to a family member. They are a heartbeat away from being a traditional family business. So that 85% UK number of family ownership it captures a broad number of businesses. What's interesting right now is that a record number of family businesses are in transition. The leading edge of the baby boomers born in 1948 are turning 76 this year, and they have really hoarded their wealth inside their business. And so you have a kind of a confluence of events, aging business owners who had smaller families in the 70s and 80s, fewer progeny to choose from. They're a better educated rising generation that are less interested in their parents' business. So you have a record number of businesses that are in transition that don't have that family transition as an option. And it is causing enormous difficulty. There is a tremendous amount of wealth destruction in the modern economy. This is, of course, problematic. Particularly, in countries like the US and the UK, you have 5.3 million family businesses in your country. It is, they are everywhere. And they are going to the oldest page in the playbook when it comes to the transition. And that is, they're typically looking either to key employees or a family member to take it over. And the reality is, globally, the success rate of family business transition is appalling. It is only 30% of family businesses transition successfully to the second generation. 30%. Now, if I do some quick math, that tells me there's a 70% failure rate. That is an enormous amount of wealth destruction. And I think that is causing, alarm, because when a family business fails, obviously, employees pay a huge price. Lenders pay a huge price. The banks are very nervous about this issue. Obviously, communities pay a huge price. It disrupts supply chains when a family business fails. You can't avoid these businesses in every vertical, whether it's manufacturing, retail, import, export. Family businesses are everywhere. So there's enormous stakes at risk here when it comes to the transition to family business. The traditional literature has really kind of pursued a singular view of a successful family business. And that view traditionally has been that success is determined by longevity. In other words, a fourth generation family business is viewed as successful. Third, more successful than a second generation. In other words, longevity seems to be kind of like I don't know, an approval, success. I wrote a book 18 years ago that actually put forward a very controversial idea. And it's an idea that really caught hold. And I think it was a book that it was actually a lot of business owners were waiting to be written. It kind of broke with traditional wisdom. And that is, it reflected my own personal experience. My family business story actually goes back to the 1920s. I had a great grandfather who was in the automobile parts distribution business. My grandfather worked with my great-grandfather. He didn't love that business, and that business was sold. My grandfather inherited. He was a chemist by training. He started a chemical manufacturing business in the 1950s. That business grew to be our largest family business. My father worked in that business. He didn't particularly love it. That one was sold for over $100 million. My father inherited. He started a plastics company, manufacturing company in 1973. That's the business that I joined in 1999. And that's the business that I ran for 8 years as CEO. That's also the business that we sold on February 8th, 2007. I don't know if anyone sees a pattern there, but we start businesses, we involve our family, we scale them, we sell them, and then we transition the wealth. We have never gifted an operating business to the next generation. And so I wrote that book. And that book and that small idea about the dangers of gifting an operating business to the next generation really found an audience. With over 1.5 million copies sold worldwide, it really opened up people's imaginations to just how dangerous it is for families to pursue their longevity of the business, as opposed to monetizing that business and transitioning the wealth. And I should make it very clear that I was actually in the process of buying my father's business at full market value based on a third-party valuation. So I came very close to actually buying that business. And then we had an unsolicited offer from a competitor, and we ended up selling that business, which was a really great move. February 7th, 2007, if you cast your mind back to that moment in time, it was just months before the world blew up. We were extraordinarily lucky, we're not that smart, to have found that exit at that particular moment. But there it was again, tires, chemicals, plastics, now publishing. I have a publishing company. I have 2 children. They're in their early 30s. I've asked them both if they'd like to risk their capital and buy my publishing company. And what do you suppose they have said? They're not interested. And so this one will also be sold. That'll be 4 businesses that we have started, scaled, and sold, and then we transition wealth. It's just a very different approach to family businesses. And I would argue, and often my message gets misconstrued. It sounds like it's a kind of an anti-family business ownership model. The reality is quite the opposite. I am a huge proponent, and I write in great detail about how families can start conversations, how they can use the 12 questions in my book to start an important conversation to explore if the rising generation wants to risk their capital and buy their parents' business. And in some cases, they do. It's rare. There are many people who will wait for transfer of ownership. And what do you suppose that triggering event is? It's death. That is what has been the triggering event for the intergenerational transition of a family business. The next generation simply just had to wait for someone to die. That has been the traditional model. And it worked remarkably well, particularly, right up until the 1960s when families, there were 3, 4, 5 children. There was a higher probability. You had more progeny to select from. Well, fast forward into the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, we know that families are smaller, 1 children, 2 children, fewer options, better educated, less interested. And what we're finding is that business owners, they're not dying at 72. That was the mortality rate back in the 1960s for men. They're now dying at 82 and 92. And so the whole transition has been pushed off 15 to 20 years. Now you have the rising generation in their 60s and 70s who are getting these businesses way too late. And quite frankly, they don't want them. And so now that is leaving business owners with really having to explore other exit or sale options. And they're limited. No one is inventing new ways to exit a business. They can sell to an employee or a key employee. They can sell to a strategic buyer, a competitor. They can sell to private equity, a financial buyer, or they can go public. Obviously, you need to scale and be large. So there are very, very limited options for business owners. Why this is problematic and why this is a huge opportunity for the folks who are joining us today on this call is we know that business owners all around the world are tempted to do one thing, and they do it habitually. And that is that when they finally turn profits, they reinvest those profits in the business. They become their own lender. They finance their own capital expansions. They fund their own inventories. They fund their own receivables. They own their own buildings. Why do they do this? Why do business owners carry, balance sheets and income statements that are under leveraged? And a lot of my research really points to the fact that business owners do this because they're in pursuit of something that is far more intoxicating than profits. They are really pursuing independence and control. If you consistently reinvest your profits into your business, you have no debt or limited debt, they're fun businesses to run. And as you move into, the business owner moves into their 50s or 60s or 70s with no leverage on their balance sheet because they continually to reinvest their profits, you can see the impending danger. You can see that someone moving into their 60s or 70s with 80 or 90% of their wealth wrapped up in their operating family business with no exit plan. You can see how perilous that and dangerous that strategy is. So I have spent the better part of 2 decades traveling, giving public lectures. I do a lot of speaking inside the financial services. I do a lot of convention work for large financial planning firms, insurance firms, law firms, accounting firms, really to help professionals understand that business owners now more than ever need advice. They need advice. They need help to get that wealth transition, get it out of their corporation. They need help monetizing that business, insuring that business. We all know the dangers of a business owner who leaves this planning too late. We know that business owners will take this subject seriously when they have a health event, or if they have 3 or 4 really challenging financial years. They get exhausted and they get scared because they know that their largest investment is at risk. And this is when they'll often turn to folks like yourself for advice on exit planning or transitioning or selling their business. What I'm liking is this idea of business owners actually tackling this subject long before they need to, so that they ready their business and get it ready for sale, even when they don't want to sell. My central thesis is that business owners who begin with the end in mind, even if their exit is 10, 15, 20 years down the road, when they're looking and building and running a business with the end in mind, they are actually building and operating more profitable businesses today. And that's a central point. I think there is a lot of people who believe, business owners who believe, that exit planning, succession planning is just something you do a year or 2 before you really want to retire and sell your business. The reality is it takes enormous work. Anyone who is going to buy that business is going to look 3, 5, 6, 7 years back in the financial history of that business to get a sense of trends. So this is not something that someone can do quickly. It's something that requires long-term planning. We also know that business owners, half of all business owners in the UK, don't have a will. I followed my first book with a second book called Willing Wisdom, a book that tried to explain why it is that business owners, who typically are better educated, more financially successful than the average consumer, why smart people do really, really stupid things. Half of all business owners in the UK die without a will. They die intestate. Of course, if you don't have a will, the UK government has a nifty little formula waiting in the background that is going to divide up your assets according to that formula. And the probability that that formula will mirror the business owner's personal intentions for the division of their assets is highly unlikely. We know all around the world, the US, Canada, UK, France, Germany, all the major Western economies, we know that the courts are absolutely full of families in disputes, legal disputes over the division of family assets, complicated assets, businesses especially, vacation homes, investment portfolios, all sorts of litigation, expensive litigation, because there was no planning. I'm very quick to remind, and I will remind the advisors on the call today that the surviving family seldom project their anger on the person who has died. They project their dissonance and disappointment on the lack of planning and the lack of wills on the advisors who have been taking fees and guiding and advising their parent. So that blame is being, lands on the shoulders of advisors, and the implications are that we know this number is pretty consistent across most countries. Between 70 and 80% of inherited wealth will pack up and move to a new advisor, a new advisory firm, because the surviving family is having to deal with the chaos that has been unleashed when someone dies intestate without a will, leaving all sorts of complexities, tax liabilities, lack of liquidity to pay estate taxes, tremendous confusion, and again, the family pack up and move. So I don't know what the UK number is, but just to give you it'll be very consistent with Canada and the US. Today in Canada, $300 million will be inherited. In the United States, $3 billion will be inherited today, tomorrow, and every single day, Saturdays and Sundays. $3 billion, $3 billion, $3 billion, every day for the next 10 years. We are in the midst of the single largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet. And when you layer on the fact that 15 million Canadians don't have a will, I think that number in the UK, if I remember correctly, it's around 28 million UK adults don't have a will. It's shocking. And so when you take that 28 million people without a will and layer that over the fact that you have a record amount of wealth in transition, you have a you have a recipe for real chaos. And so this is the problem. The good news is, it also, in the midst of a problem, there is a solution. And the only solution that I can find rests at the feet of folks like you. There are certain advisors who don't want to tackle this issue. I mean, really, what have I been writing about and talking about for 20 years? It's talking about starting family conversations, preparing heirs, making sure proper documents are in place, but more importantly, that these documents are actually communicated to the rising generation so that they're prepared. You can't have a conversation about a will unless you have a will. Part of what I'm writing about is this collaborative approach to estate planning, where at the center of that process is the advisor who gathers families and have facilitated family meetings to start these conversations and answer the question, how, when, who, and how much wealth will transition. Typically, historically, we know that the vast majority of wealth will transition on death. That is not working. When you have someone in their 80s and 90s dying and then leaving their wealth to people in their 60s and 70s who don't need it, it's not working. We have a rising generation in their 20s who can't afford education, healthcare, homes. We all know what's going on with real estate valuations all around the world. So what we have in many cases are people, grandparents, generation skipping over their adult children and leaving money to their grandchildren, which is causing enormous problems inside families. In many cases, you have grandparents who equate estate planning with economic need. So they're looking at their adult children and say, well, they have careers and they have homes and they go on vacations. They don't need our money. So they skip over their adult children, leave it to their grandchildren, but they're unaware of the fact that the lifestyle of G2, their own children, is funded with debt. So fast forward that movie and that grandparent dies. And then, of course, you have all sorts of breakdowns in relationships between G2 and G3. In some cases, you have G3 grandchildren who have more personal net worth. They have more money than their parents. And so you can see the complexities that this causes, and you can see why a lot of advisors may not want to look at this, and it feels messy. It is messy. It's very messy, and it feels tricky, and it feels awkward, and it feels like you're stepping into what we would describe as a hornet's nest. It feels like, why would you open up a conversation around the transition of money? I mean, it feels like such a dangerous conversation. You've worked hard to onboard a client, but it feels like if you start that conversation, you're going to lose that client. My advice to you is to really kind of set that aside. That is a fear-based approach to financial planning. You may, in some cases, lose a client, but you will absolutely find more clients. I can tell you that in what we would describe as the high net worth, ultra high net worth, or the mass affluent market in North America, that investments are table stakes. Investments, portfolio, stock picking, whatever you want to call it, it's been commoditized. There's been fee compression, over-regulation. If you're in the investments and insurance business, that's a commodity. There's over 30,000 investment advisors in Canada, over 300,000 advisors for consumers to choose from in the US. I know it's a crowded marketplace in the UK, similarly. So what is that differentiator? What is it that you folks can do to separate yourself from the pack, to make your brand, your offering unique and valuable? Well, I can tell you without any doubt that high net worth and ultra high net worth folks, what keeps them up at night is not whether or not they're fully insured, or whether or not you're going to build a portfolio of stocks that's going to return 6.3% return on invested capital versus 9.1. They're interested in returns, but I'll tell you what's really keeping them up at night. How much do I leave to my children? How much is too much? How much should I leave to charity? How much is too much to leave to charity? Which charity? There's tens of thousands of charities to select from. When do I leave my wealth? Do I leave it all in my estate and triggered by my death? Or do I start to transition some of that wealth now in a tax efficient way? These are the questions that are keeping people up at night. And often when they reach out for answers, they're met with apprehension or ambivalence by advisors who feel like this conversation is too tricky, or that they don't have the answers. I can tell you with great certainty right now that at least a third of the people on this call don't have a will. If you don't have a will and you haven't done your own work, I am hard pressed to imagine that you are going to sit down in front of a client and make a compelling case for them to get their affairs organized. If you haven't had your own family meeting to bring your own heirs together to talk about the transition of your own wealth, and if you can't describe what you felt, the kinds of issues that you encountered in those family meetings, how that family meeting was designed, if you can't have those conversations because you haven't done your own work, you are going to miss out on the mass affluent market. You are not going to be relatable. Clients have an uncanny ability to read the confidence of their advisors. And the vast majority are not going to come out and ask full out whether or not you've done your own work if you've got a will. I tell advisors all the time, you should never leave your office without a copy of your own will. You all have clients who have never seen a will. They don't have a will, they've never seen one. If you're a business owner, you don't have a will, we know the stakes are really high. So by producing and showing someone your own will, I do it all the time. When I'm speaking, I often take my will out of my pocket and I toss it out into the audience. And it's hilarious. You see some people, they're like, they don't even want to touch it. There is a tremendous amount of superstition around this subject. They think if they sign a will, hold a will, bring a will into their home, that they will immediately die. You know, it's absurd. It would be like saying that if you get a will written, sign a will, bring that home, that you're guaranteed to add 10 years to your life. Both are absurd. So when you can take your own will out of your pocket, show it to someone, make it kind of matter of fact, make it kind of like standard procedure. If you all help your clients find a solicitor who really specializes in this area of the law, make it easy, set up an appointment, really drive home the importance of having these documents in place. Listen, you've got a 1 in 2 chance that the client or prospect that you're talking to hasn't done the basics. This is a perfect wedge issue. It's a perfect way to wedge yourself into a relationship and onboard a client. Ben Feldman, one of the most successful US insurance salesmen, was notorious for beginning client conversations this way. Imagine I'm Ben Feldman. He would sit down across from a business owner. They're the wealthiest clients. And Ben Feldman would say something like this. He would say, hey, Bill, really great to finally get to meet you face to face. You're a leader in this community. You're a business owner. I've been so excited to have this opportunity to meet with you today and learn a little bit more about you. But tell me, Bill, before I begin telling you all the things that I could sell, Bill, I want to ask you one question. Tell me, Bill, what's in your will? It is a brilliant question. Ben Feldman knew, by the way, there's 127 million Americans without a will. Ben Feldman knew that there was a 1 in 2 chance that that successful aging business owner didn't have a will. And so if Bill, the prospect, would answer by saying, well, actually, Ben, I do have a will. I sit down with my current advisor annually in our annual facilitated family meeting, and we update our documents. We go over our investments. We make sure that our children have estate documents as well. We share our documents. If Ben Feldman hears that answer, he's like, waiter, give me the check. He's out of there. He's going to waste his, he's not going to dislodge that client from that relationship. Those are sticky relationships. On the other hand, if Ben Feldman heard Bill say, well, actually, I don't have a will, do you know what Ben Feldman would do? Ben Feldman would end the meeting. He would say, Bill, I cannot believe, as a leader in this community, as a business owner, and I know that you've got most of your wealth. I'd be shocked if you don't have most of your wealth in your business. Who is your current advisor? Who would leave you in this position? Listen, I'm not going to talk to you about insurance today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my office and I'm going to send you an email and get you organized. If you want to drop by my office, I'll bring the lawyer, the solicitor to my office. Before this week is over, we need to get your will done. We need to get you organized. Do you see what he did? He put the care before the products. He put the care, the compassion, and the urgency around the relationship, even before it had begun. And he would end that meeting and he would get that prospect organized. Now, what do you think that prospect felt about the way that he approached that relationship? Listen, what is insurance? It's a financial instrument that provides for people when we can't. What's a will? It's a document that speaks to our family when we can't. You can have a conversation with clients or prospects about insurance and never use the word insurance. You can talk to them about their estate, and you're having a conversation about insurance. You can talk to prospects and clients about the transition of a family home and the transition of family wealth and their wills, and you're going to reveal the gaps in their planning. The tax liabilities, the lack of liquidity to pay capital gains and inheritance taxes. You don't have to mention insurance at all. They'll mention insurance. You're the solution. Trying to sell products before the problem is defined is insane. You're wasting your time. But I can tell you that one probative question, do you have a will? Will start a completely different conversation. A conversation that I think is the most profitable conversation that you will ever have. The amount of underinsured business owners is alarming. Why aren't we reading about more of this? I think it's much like fraud. The reason fraudsters are able to perpetuate their crimes is because the people who are duped are so embarrassed and so full of shame that they don't tell their story. Right? Lots of frauds go unreported because it's just embarrassing when we're gullible. I think the same thing happens when a family member or business owner dies intestate. I think the family, when they know that they could have avoided problems that had cost the family hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds, are so embarrassed that the problem could have been resolved by spending £1,000. It's embarrassing. So they don't tell the story. And it gets buried, and then families repeat. So I think we're at a real inflection point right now. There's a tremendous opportunity for folks like yourself to have a different kind of conversation. And I just want to wrap up and this is a really crucial point. What I've tried to do in my second book, Willing Wisdom, is try to really unearth what is really going on. Why is it that people are procrastinating and so overwhelmed by this subject of transitioning wealth that they don't even do the basics? And I think I figured it out. I think everywhere that I have traveled, including I've done lots of public speaking in the UK, wherever I go, there is an idea that estate planning answers the question, who gets my stuff when I'm dead? So you can imagine that if we're framing estate planning either as a tax problem or who gets my stuff when I'm dead, boy, pretty hard to put fun back into funeral and estate planning when that's all it is. You can see how dark and sad and morose the subject is. What I write about in Willing Wisdom, I flip that. And what I write about and say, the biggest beneficiary of good estate planning, the biggest beneficiary of my estate plan is me. Because I have worked with my advisor to organize family meetings and bring my family together. I'm 63 years old. I've been to 58 consecutive family meetings. I grew up in a very odd culture where there was lots of transparency around family wealth and how it was going to transition. We share our documents. It's an odd family. It's very rare. But that's what I write about. In an idealized sense, I show what could be. It's aspirational for sure. It will be anathema to a lot of people, what I write about, but at least I give them the mental picture of what calm, consistent, transparent family conversations look like, what a family meeting looks like. And so I'm the beneficiary of my estate plan because my beneficiaries know exactly how my wealth will transition. Not only have I shared my estate planning documents, not only my will, but my powers of attorney for health. This is key. Who is going to be providing the oversight and the provision of long-term care for people who are not dying at 72, but 92? Where are we placing hope that our caregivers are going to provide for us. Who are they? They're our family. The same people that we're keeping financial secrets from in our estate plan are the people we hope are going to step up and provide care or oversight of our care when we lose capacity. What is going on? This is the key point. When your clients can work with you to have a facilitated family meeting to bring transparency to their estate plan, they also open up conversations around who is going to provide for their long-term care. That's the self-interest in estate planning. So when you can remind your clients that if they don't have these documents, and more importantly, if they don't communicate these documents and share these documents with the people who will be impacted by these documents, they are going to pay a huge price. You see what I just did there? I just brought the urgency, the self-interest to the front of the conversation. You want to watch people get excited about estate planning and the transition of family wealth? It's the long-term care piece that you need to remind is connected to estate planning. It's an exciting time for you folks. I can tell you that the solicitors are not tackling this issue. I mean, if they did, you wouldn't have 26, 27, 28 million UK adults without a will. Accountants, too busy. Plus, everything looks like a tax problem. No one is driving this issue. You folks are the last hope. You are the last hope, the only hope to help people understand the implications, the real implications, financial implications of ignoring estate planning. And I think when you do this, it's an exciting time for you folks. When you frame what it is you're doing and how important you are to not only creating family success, individual success, personal financial success. You're not building wealth, you're building wealthy families. And when you have a family-centric view of the work that you do, you are going to do exciting work. You're going to do profoundly important work. And quite frankly, I'm excited for you. We've never had so much wealth transitioning between the generations that require the expertise that all of you have. So let me wrap up there and thank you for the opportunity. I've only scratched the surface. I've really talked about only Every Family's Business, my first book, The Transitioning of a Business, and I touched on a little bit on Willing Wisdom. I have a third book. It's my last book in the trilogy. It's called The Happy Inheritor, and I really get granular and get into the details on how advisors can organize a family meeting. Who would you invite? Where would the meeting take place? How often would the meeting take place? What would the agenda? I offer sample agendas. I get really granular about how you can start to use family meetings to attract wealthy clients who need your help. So let's wrap it up there, and happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was very insightful. Thank you. For me, the stat that you said about half of UK business owners not having a will dying intestate is incredibly a big figure. And the impact of that, of leaving the family to pass on anger to the memory of the deceased and their advisors, causing the surviving family to find a new advisor, is a massive, massive problem. So thank you for sharing, Tom. And the first question from me, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Tom, maybe we can begin by offering you an overview of the family business landscape here in the UK and globally. Why should advisors be paying special attention to this section now, please?
Well, I would reiterate the fact that they're an aging demographic. They have literally hoarded their wealth inside their corporation. So they've reinvested profits year after year after year, in many cases 20, 30, 40 years of reinvesting profits into their business. So you can imagine if you're 80 years old and you've got 80% of your wealth or 90% of your wealth in your family business and the equity of your business with no exit plan. I mean, as a wealth advisor and as an investment advisor, can you imagine advising someone to put 80% of their money in Enron? I mean, it would be insane. You'd lose your license. But this is exactly what you're doing a lot of advisors, a lot of insurance professionals, they'll talk about the business owner's wealth that sits outside their business. But when it comes to the equity or the retained earnings, they leave it alone. They feel like, I don't know, they're either intimidated by it or they don't feel like maybe they have the expertise. But listen, if a business owner has £5 million to invest outside their business, he's got 25 million in his business that is sitting there without a plan. So part of what I'm saying is they need help. And when, as they get older, it's terrifying. Can you imagine how terrifying it must be being 73 years old with so much wealth at risk in one business without a succession plan or a generational transition plan? It's terrifying. They won't show it. I mean, families are incredibly great at putting a veneer of everything's great, everything, you know, our family gets along, we have great relationships. It's BS. There is all sorts of turmoil and sibling rivalry and confusion. It is not a great place that they're in. So don't be put off by that. Don't be confused by that. Nothing is going particularly well inside family businesses with an aging business owner. They are in a world of hurt. So I think I think if you can actually, kind of let them know that what they're feeling, and that you want to help, that you've got solutions, that you've seen this before, that you've got a track record of helping a business owner transition. And also to let them know that there is no shame. This has been a big part of my work, is helping business owners understand there is no shame in selling a family business. Culturally, there is. Culturally, we've been led to believe that if you don't transition your business to your family, that as a business owner, somehow you failed. You failed yourself, your employees, your family. Old is good, built to last. Longevity is the metric for measuring a family business success. I come along and say, what are you talking about? We measure success in terms of profits. A business is an instrument of wealth creation. It's not your friend. It's not your pet. It's not your community. It is an important undertaking that creates profits and earnings and wealth. And the biggest mistake you can make is to become emotionally connected to it. So if you don't have a family member who wants to buy that business at full market value based on a third-party valuation, don't give it to them. You need to sell it and then transition your wealth to them. It's a simple idea. You want to watch a business owner's eyes light up when you give them permission to sell a family business and to reinforce the idea that this is the high water mark of success of entrepreneurship. The accountants aren't going to tell them to do that. And the solicitor isn't going to tell them to do that. What happens if you're the accountant or you're the solicitor and the business is sold? You lose the file. We have business owners all around the world turning to their most trusted advisor, their solicitors and their accountants. And what they're getting is incredibly biased advice. What I'm doing is trying to tip the balance, or at least level the playing field, and give them an alternative perspective, which is, why would you transition a business to a family member who doesn't want to risk their capital to buy it? You may have a son or daughter working in the business who's very good at running the business, but operations and running the business management is very different from ownership. Only in the world of family businesses do we conflate the two. I just bought some stock in Apple. I own it, but I don't think I control it. There's a lot of people in family businesses that are working that believe that there's something called sweat equity. If I work hard enough in my parents' business, one day it will all be mine. Like they owe it to me. Not based on conversation, based on people making assumptions. And it's causing enormous difficulties in families. So all of this to say, the landscape in the UK, it's not good. It's replicated all around the world. As business owners age, and a record amount of wealth is transitioning. Now more than ever, they need your help. There's real urgency around this subject. The flip side to all of this is you have some clients, younger clients in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, who have identified this problem, and they are buying these family businesses for pennies on the dollar. When the business owner dies, underinsured, lack of liquidity, huge tax liability, they're picking these businesses off from the surviving family for huge discounts. So yeah, the good news is there's a big problem. That's the bad news. The good news is you're the solution, and it's an urgent, a huge opportunity. It's an exciting time to be an advisor in the UK right now.
Lovely. Thank you, Tom. I think I'll ask one more question.
Yep.
And if you could share 3 things that every business owner should do after this Zoom call, what would they be?
If you don't have a will, get a will. If you haven't had a family meeting, have your own family meeting. And don't try to go it alone. If you're an advisor, you need a third party in the room. It's like the shoemaker who has a hole in the bottom of his shoe. Like you guys are you have some of the worst financial plans yourself. You try to do your own financial planning. This is not something you can or should do on your own. So I don't know, find someone in your practice, someone you trust, a third party, an accountant, solicitor, or someone, someone that you trust that you can bring into your own family meeting. Document your experience. What are you feeling? What issues are you having to tackle? Is fair equal? You might have 2 children, one who is a high achiever, high income earner, and another not so much. How are you personally going to wrestle with the division of your own assets? Document your own feelings. Document your own solutions. When you tell your own personal stories, you become incredibly relatable. And then what you're going to see is reciprocity. You're going to see clients understand that you've shared something very personal, and you'll often be met with that same kind of vulnerability. You've dared to be seen and heard, and clients pick up on that. They really do. So do your own work first. If you do have a will, please make sure it's updated. Half of all solicitors in the UK don't even have a will. For those that do, half of them are outdated. This is a problem everywhere. 1968, when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in Los Angeles, that was a pretty horrific day for Americans. The good news is he had a will. The bad news is, who do you think his executor was? It was his brother, assassinated 5 years earlier, John F. Kennedy. He never updated his will. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was the attorney general. 4 US presidents have died without a will. 2 were lawyers. I'm talking about the bar is so low when it comes to estate planning, preparedness. The opportunity for you to make a difference and to differentiate yourself in your community is so appallingly simple because the bar is so low. So do your own work. If you don't have a document, you get your documents done. Family meeting, have your own family meetings, update your documents. And then lastly, really work with compassion. You have to understand that there is a lot of shame, personal shame around this subject. And you really have to be mindful of that. And when you can acknowledge that, talk about your own family dynamics in really kind of personal, in a very personal way. There is a lot going on in families. Addiction, spending problems. I swear family is Latin for seriously messed up. I don't know if that's the exact Latin translation, but that's what it ought to be. Families are deeply complex. And I think that complexity and those dynamics create shame, which create barriers to conversations, which create huge, huge financial problems, particularly with the transition of wealth. And I think when you understand that and you can talk about that and start these important, listen, all I'm trying to do with my books is start conversations. I don't sell product. I don't even consult. I just write and provide books that advisors share with their clients to start conversations. Where those conversations go, this is the exciting part of the work, is up to the client. And the best part, and I really want to really drive this home, understand that you don't have the answers to these family problems, nor should you. So you're not Dr. Phil, you're not a clinical psychologist, you're not a psychiatrist, you're not a family therapist. That's not what I'm just saying that you must become. I'm saying that when you create the conditions for a family to come together, you can resource those particular assets for a family who needs a clinical psychologist. You can round out your referral network and find these people in your community and make it easy for your clients to find those resources. That is the role of an advisor. And when you work with that kind of resourcefulness, solving problems, not yourself, but by getting the right kind of professional resources for your clients, this is what I'm describing in my books. It is powerful work. And really what it is going to do, I don't know how many clients the average advisor on this call has, but really what I'm describing is advisors actually trimming the list of their clients and collecting between 25 and 50 families. I want advisors to collect entire families, generations. Families are sticky. They don't pack up and leave because you have a bad year. They are sticky. And you're going to have capacity problems anyways. If you do the kind of work that I'm describing, you're going to have capacity. You're going to be too busy. But really, what I'm trying to get you to do is to find ideal clients, ideal client families, and to build family wealth. To have a family-centric view of the work that you do. If you do all of that stuff, if you do your own work, share your stories, listen, be empathetic, work with empathy, you are going to impact, you're going to have an extraordinary impact on lives and your communities. I'm excited for you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Really appreciate your time today. And again, the best place to purchase Tom's books, Every Family's Business, Willing Wisdom, or The Happy Inheritor, is not Amazon, but rather from thomaswilliamsdeans.com directly, with bulk discounts for advisors and free shipping to the UK. Thank you once again, Tom, and back to Michael.
Tom, thank you so much for braving the storm for us and showing up in your splendor. So really appreciate your time today, sir. And we've had lots of feedback from the members to say that they've got a lot of value out of it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my message. Thank you.
Yeah, well, listen, anytime, Tom, we'll gladly have you back. And perhaps next time you come, you can check in with our members to see if that gap between those that have wills and those that don't have wills has actually changed following your conversation today.
I love it. I love it. Great idea.
Okay, so you keep well. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Okay, MDRT brothers and sisters, thank you so much for your attention today. Tom, obviously, he's a world-class speaker. He speaks all over the world. He sold millions of books, and yet he dialed in at 3 a.m. from Canada for you. So hopefully you get the feeling of belonging to something that that can help you, help your families, help your own businesses. And just so we can make it tangible, something that kind of showed up for me is that if Dr. Tom Deans is right, and there's people on this call who don't have a will, then I suggest you do a Ben Feldman with yourself. Your next cup of coffee after this, just, rather than all the stuff you can sell to yourself, why don't you tell yourself what you have in the will and what your plans are, and make sure it's up to date and make sure it's right. What I'd also suggest is, following this call today, why don't you speak to 3 of your business owners? And you could even just lead in, as Tom said, just start these conversations. I've just had this guy, Dr. Tom Deans, and he's talking about businesses. And I just wanted to check in with you about blah, 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 blah. Yep, there's nothing stopping you doing that. That's 3 calls. You could check in and put your arms around your people. So have that, and I hope that activity works. Conscious of time, as you know, we're meeting March 5th. We've got a joint day with the PFS. Many of you are meeting us for dinner on the 4th. And thank you so much to those who have hounded and you've given me your menus, and that's all locked in now. If anyone still wants to join us, can you please let me know as soon as possible? My email address is michael@carpediemfinancial.co.uk. We have a great keynote speaker lined up. I spoke with her 2 days ago. She was the youngest woman to have scaled Everest, and she has some great takeaways as well. So we've also got many MDRT members that are sacrificing their time to again show up for us with some great content. So if you're not booked in already, I think there's only maybe 20 or 30 chairs left. Make sure you book in, tell your friends, and obviously we'll look forward to see you for the dinner on the 4th. And as a final point of housekeeping, the registration for the annual meeting in Miami goes live in March. So if you do want to come to the annual meeting, obviously that's your opportunity, and we'd love to see you out there, and obviously start some more great conversations as Tom has done today. So with that, my MDRT family, I'll say have a great day and go and start those great conversations. Thanks now, and thanks for your time, Chris, for sharing.
Thanks, Michael. Bye all.